November 1944, Kummersdorf Proving Ground, south of Berlin. The cold wind swept through the skeletal remains of a once proud testing complex. Concrete firing ranges, their edges chipped by years of artillery trials, stood half buried in frost. Beneath a grey sky, a truck convoy rattled through the gates, its cargo tarped in olive-drab canvas, marked with a white five-pointed star. The guards recognized the markings instantly. An American tank. Captured near Stolberg, the transport officer reported, handing over a manifest to the senior engineer. Operational when found, though the turret traverse gear was jammed. It's one of their new types, the long-gun Sherman. The officer's tone carried a mix of curiosity and disdain. By late 1944, the German army had faced thousands of Shermans in France, Italy, and now in the Ardennes. Most had burned under the guns of Panthers and Tigers, but this one was different, the barrel longer, the muzzle brake sharper, the smell of burned propellant still clinging to its steel skin. On the side of the hull, barely legible through dust and rust, stenciled letters read M4A176W. The Americans called it the 76. Major Rudolf Hartmann, senior ordnance evaluator with the Heereswaffenamt, walked slowly around the vehicle as mechanics removed the tarps. He'd spent most of the war testing enemy weapons, Soviet T-34 seconds, British Churchills, even a captured KV-1 back in 1941. But American designs rarely impressed him. The Sherman is a washing machine with a cannon, he'd once told a room full of engineers. Reliable, yes, but crude. He tapped the side armour with his cane, 63 millimeters. By the look of it, cast hull, not welded. Soft steel, he muttered. It won't stop a 75 at 500 meters. But what interested him today wasn't the armour, it was the gun. Mounted in a narrow mantlet sat the 76 millimeters M1A1 cannon, longer than the older Sherman's 75 millimeters piece, sleek and efficient. German intelligence reports had warned about this weapon for months. Improved velocity, new armor-piercing rounds, and faster engagement times. Some claimed it could punch through the front of a Panther turret at close range. Hartmann dismissed such talk as Allied propaganda. Still, he had been ordered to test it. The Führerhauptquartier demanded answers. He turned to his assistant, Lieutenant Karl Brenner, a young ordnance officer who had studied engineering before the war. "Get me the firing data tables from our KUK-42, Hartmann ordered. We'll compare muzzle energy directly. Brenner nodded, clutching a leather notebook. Yes, Herr Major, but I've read that the Americans use different propellant charges, more compact, faster burning. Hartmann smiled faintly. And they still shoot from a turret made of kitchen pots. We'll see. Inside the workshop, floodlights illuminated every surface of the captured Sherman. Mechanics crawled over the turret, measuring, sketching, and photographing. They removed the breech block from the 76 mm gun, laying it beside a Panther's 7.5 centimeters, KHK 42 liters, 70 for comparison. The difference was striking. The Panther's shell was heavier, its chamber longer, its muzzle velocity higher, 935 meters per second. The Sherman's M1A1, firing the standard AP M62, reached roughly 810. On paper, the Panther dominated. But when Brenner opened the American ammunition crate, he noticed something peculiar. Each round came with a fixed brass casing, pre-assembled, smooth-edged, light enough to handle easily. German shells, by contrast, were separate loading in many heavy guns, or packed with greased paper seals that required precision and strength. "Notice the weight," Brenner said, holding one in both hands. "It's balanced." Hartmann nodded reluctantly. Yes, a loader could handle that faster. The phrase hung in the air for a moment, unspoken implication sinking in. 2 days later, the first firing trial began. The target range extended out to 1,200 meters, a line of rusted steel plates from previous tests. Windless and clear, the perfect conditions for ballistic data. Observers gathered. Wehrmacht officers, engineers, and a few skeptical panzer crewmen pulled from training units nearby. Among them was Oberfeldwebel Heinrich Volk, a veteran Panther gunner from the Eastern Front. He had faced T-34, 85 seconds and IS-2 seconds and survived. He regarded the Sherman with visible contempt. "They call this their best tank?" Volk muttered. "We'll see if it can hit anything." The American tank was manned by a German test crew trained in enemy equipment. The loader, a wiry corporal from Dresden, sat ready with 6 rounds of captured 76mm ammunition. Stopwatches clicked. "Fire when ready," Hartmann ordered. The breech slammed shut with a metallic snap, a moment's pause. Then boom! The shot cracked across the frozen air, echoing downrange. The shell struck the 800-meter plate dead center, leaving a neat, round puncture. Before the observers could even lower their binoculars, the loader had already rammed the second round. Boom! The second impact landed less than 2 inches from the first. Stopwatches ticked. 4.6 seconds between shots, Brenner called out. Volk frowned. Impossible. He didn't even adjust the sight. "Stabilizer, Herr Feldwebel," Brenner explained quietly. "The Americans use a gyroscopic stabilizer in the turret." Volk's eyes widened slightly. "That toy? It works?" Hartmann leaned forward, jaw tightening. "Continue." By the 5th shot, the pattern was undeniable. Each round fired within 5 to 6 seconds of the previous one. The gun steady, the recoil smooth, the loader's rhythm unbroken. Even when the tank was rotated 30 degrees to simulate engagement on the move, the crew maintained the pace. At last, Hartmann signaled ceasefire. The Sherman's barrel glowed faintly orange from friction heat. He walked to the firing line, staring through binoculars. The steel plates were pocked with tight clusters of holes, each nearly overlapping the next. "Time?" he asked. Brenner glanced at his notebook. Average reload, 5.1 seconds, including aim correction. Total cycle per shot, 6.4 seconds. Hartmann said nothing. Volk finally spoke. "That's faster than we can load the QK-42, even with an experienced loader." "Yes," Brenner agreed softly. "Much faster." To eliminate doubt, Hartmann ordered a direct comparison. Panther versus captured Sherman, side by side. A Panther D from the nearby Panzer Ersatz unit was brought to the range. Its 5-man crew stood by, confident. The test would consist of a 10-shot timed sequence at a 1,000-meter target, measuring both accuracy and rate of fire. "Both begin on command," Hartmann declared. "Fire as rapidly as accuracy allows." At his signal, 2 thunderclaps erupted almost simultaneously. Both tanks fired once, recoil rocking their frames. But seconds later, the Sherman thundered again before the Panther's loader had even closed the breach. "Second round already," Volk muttered, stopwatch trembling in his hand. By the 3rd American shot, the Panther's second finally fired. After 10 shots, the Panther completed its sequence in 1 minute, 12 seconds. The Sherman finished in 48 seconds flat. Accuracy? Nearly identical. Heat distortion? Minimal. Barrel wear? Acceptable. Hartmann's staff checked the data again, disbelieving. The American 76mm had delivered the same volume of accurate fire 30% faster. "It's impossible," one engineer protested. "Their breech block is smaller, it should jam at that rate." But it hadn't. The loader's position, the shell's weight, the smooth ejector, everything had been designed for speed. Hartmann finally turned to Brenner. "Calculate theoretical rate of sustained fire." Brenner scribbled in his notebook. "Assuming constant ready rounds in the turret rack, roughly 10 rounds per minute, maybe 11 before fatigue." 10 per minute? Volk repeated. "That's light artillery speed." "Exactly," Brenner said. "It's almost a field gun, inside a tank." That evening, Inside the officers' mess, the test results spread quickly. Some dismissed them outright. They must have used modified propellant, one Panther commander argued. The Americans cheat the tests. Others questioned the crew training. Their loader was smaller, maybe more agile. But those who had witnessed it firsthand could not deny what they saw. The Sherman's loader never paused, never struggled to fit the round. The layout of the fighting compartment ammunition stored vertically at arm's reach, recoil guards low and smooth, hatch clear of obstruction all favoured efficiency. Panzer loaders often bruised themselves on turret fittings, struggling with the long 75 mm shells in cramped space. The Panther's high-velocity round weighed nearly 7 kilograms more than the Sherman's 76 millimeters. Over a full engagement, that difference meant seconds, sometimes life or death. Hartmann poured himself a glass of schnapps, staring at the flickering lamp. "We over-designed everything," he muttered. "Armour, optics, engines. But not the men inside." Brenner nodded cautiously. "Their philosophy is different. They design for the crew first, machine second." Hartmann frowned. "That may win exercises, not wars." But deep down, even he knew better. 3 days later, the Heereswaffenamt issued its preliminary evaluation. The document, stamped Geheim, summarized the findings. The captured US 76 mm M1A1 gun demonstrates high reliability and rapid rate of fire. In controlled tests, experienced crews achieved sustained firing intervals of approximately 5 to 6 seconds. German comparative tests, Panther KUK 42 litres, 70 average 8 to 9 seconds per shot under identical conditions. The superior rate of fire results primarily from ammunition handling and internal layout rather than mechanical superiority. It was a carefully worded admission, one that avoided the word better, but could not disguise the truth. In December 1944, as snow blanketed the Ardennes, reports reached Kummersdorf, confirming the test results in blood. A Panther from 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich had been ambushed near Bastogne. The tank was struck 3 times in 12 seconds, 2 hits to the side turret, 1 through the mantlet. The crew escaped, shaken. Recovered fragments showed American 76 mm AP shells. When interrogated, the Panther commander insisted, "They fired like machine guns. I barely had time to reload before the second shell hit." Hartmann received the report in his office. He read it twice, then placed it beside the firing data sheet from the proving ground. The pattern was identical. He turned to Brenner. "So, the front confirms what the range told us." "Yes, Herr Major." "Then the Americans have achieved something we didn't think possible. They made speed into a weapon." By late December, more Shermans with the 76 mm gun appeared in battle reports. To German crews, they were simply the long-nose Shermans. At first, they were mistaken for Firefly's British conversions mounting 17-pounders, but field intelligence soon clarified. These were American-built, mass-produced, and arriving in huge numbers. Each was a machine designed not for duels, but for tempo, the rhythm of modern mechanized warfare. Where German tanks struck hard and waited for fuel, the Sherman advanced, fired, adjusted, and fired again, relentlessly, efficiently, predictably. Hartmann's next report to Berlin carried a line that no one in the German command wanted to read. American tank design reflects industrial philosophy, mass, efficiency, simplicity of operation. Their new 76 mm model cannot outgun our Panthers in penetration, but its rate of fire compensates tactically. Against multiple Shermans, even our best tanks risk being overwhelmed before achieving equal number of hits. He sealed the document, aware it might never reach anyone who cared. The Reich was collapsing, factories bombed, fuel gone, divisions shattered. Yet in those final months, Hartmann understood something profound. Germany's greatest flaw was not the quality of its weapons. but their inflexibility, the refusal to believe that simplicity could outperform sophistication. The Americans had built a gun not to impress, but to function fast, repeatable, lethal in its rhythm. As night fell over Kummersdorf, the captured Sherman stood silent under the floodlights, its long barrel pointing toward the frozen horizon. Mechanics draped it once more with canvas, the white star hidden but not forgotten. Brenner turned off the generator. The last echo of the day faded into the cold. He looked back one last time and whispered, "They call it the Easy 8. Perhaps that's why it wins." The 19th of December, 1944, near Bastogne, Belgium. The Ardennes forest groaned beneath the weight of snow. Pines bent under ice, muffling the thunder of distant guns. The fog was so thick it clung to the barrels of tanks, turning steel into grey silhouettes that crawled through the trees like ghosts. Oberfeldwebel Heinrich Volk squinted from the commander's cupola of his Panther, the number 213, hastily painted white on the turret. His breath crystallized against the rim of his headset. He had been ordered to flank south of Bastogne, a reconnaissance in force, they called it, but everyone knew it was no simple patrol. It was a hunt. Beside him, his gunner Klaus Engel, a quiet man from Cologne, adjusted the turret traverse lever with the gentleness of a pianist. Their Panther OSF G had been freshly serviced. The KBUK, 42 litres, 70 gun, oiled and sighted in, was capable of killing anything the Americans fielded, at least on paper. Volk trusted it. He had trusted it since Kursk, but what he didn't trust was the weather, the fuel, or the men now fighting alongside him, replacements barely old enough to shave. The radio crackled. Panther Group, halt at grid 271. Recon ahead reports Sherman's moving through the Valley Road. 3, maybe 4. Likely the new long gun variant. Volk exhaled slowly. The 76 again, he murmured. Engel glanced up. Like the one they tested at Kummersdorf? Volk nodded. They said it fires twice as fast as we do. I didn't believe it. He didn't want to. They crept to the ridge, overlooking a narrow road bordered by snow-laden trees. The valley below was silent except for the faint hum of engines. Soon, shapes emerged from the fog, olive-drab silhouettes, high silhouettes, square turrets, Shermans. 4 of them, moving in column, careful but confident. The lead tank bore white identification, stars half covered by mud. Their engines purred smoothly, exhaust steaming in rhythm. Volk gestured toward the gunner. Range 600 meters. Second tank in column. Engel adjusted the sight. Loaded with Pays GR 39/42. Feuer frei! The Panther roared. The 75mm shell streaked across the valley and slammed into the Sherman's side armor, an explosion of sparks and smoke. The tank jerked violently, turret whipping sideways. Hit! Engel barked. But before Volk could order another target, the second Sherman's turret snapped toward them impossibly fast. Reload, Schnell. The Panther's loader, Fritz, jammed the heavy shell into the breech, his breath ragged. But the Sherman fired first. A bright flash, followed by the whine of impact, a 76mm AP round, ricocheted off their glacis plate, leaving a deep gouge. Close! 2 degrees right, Engel shouted. Another flash. Another hit, this time on the mantlet. The armor held, but the vibration rattled every bolt in the turret. They've fired twice already, Fritz gasped, struggling to shove the third round into the gun. Steady, Volk barked. Range 550. Their next shell thundered out, striking the lead Sherman's turret ring. Penetration. Flames erupted from the hatches. The crew bailed out, scrambling into the snow. But even as the first enemy burned, the others returned fire fast, relentless, methodical. Bang! Bang! The sound came like drum beats, steady and exact, 1 every 6 seconds. Volk had seen American tanks before, but never like this. The pattern was mechanical, as if the entire enemy platoon was moving to the same rhythm, loaders working in perfect unison. Fritz slammed another round home, hands bleeding from the cold. Up! Fire! Their shot missed, The next Sherman 76mm didn't. The impact shook the Panther's side skirt clean off, steel fragments whirling through the air. The radio operator screamed as shrapnel sliced his shoulder. "Damage to left suspension," Engel shouted. "We're hit." Volk bit down on his lip until he tasted blood. "Reverse, smoke jets." The driver popped the smoke launchers. White clouds blossomed around the Panther as it lurched backward into cover, engine whining. Through the haze, Volk caught a glimpse of the American formation still advancing. Calmly, guns trained on every possible retreat path. Their loaders never stopped. One shot, then another, each like the tick of a metronome counting down their death. They managed to retreat 200 meters uphill before the gearbox began to protest. Inside, the air was thick with cordite and fear. Fritz sat slumped beside the ammunition racks, breathing hard. "They shouldn't be able to fire that fast," he muttered. "It's like artillery." Volk said nothing. His hands trembled slightly as he removed his headset. "Report ammunition count." 11 rounds. "Left," Engel said. "All armor-piercing. Keep them. We'll need everyone." Outside, distant explosions echoed through the forest, other German units engaging, other crews learning the same brutal lesson. The Americans weren't just better supplied, they were faster. Their tanks didn't duel, they swarmed. Volk stared at the snow melting on the interior hatch. "Maybe the engineers were right," he murmured. "Their gun isn't better, their crew is." That evening, Volk reported to the local command post, a farmhouse basement converted into a temporary HQ. Candles flickered over maps littered with red and blue pins. Major Albrecht, commanding the local Kampfgruppe, looked up from his desk. "Report, Oberfeldwebel." Volk saluted stiffly. Encountered 4 enemy Shermans with the new 76mm gun. Destroyed one, damaged another. Lost one, Panther, immobilized. Cause: hits to suspension, rapid consecutive fire. 3 impacts within 20 seconds. Albrecht frowned. 20 seconds? Yes, Herr Major. They fired faster than expected, much faster. The Major exchanged glances with his adjutant. "You're certain?" "I watched them," Volk said, voice low. 1 round every 6 seconds, consistent. They didn't miss by much. He reached into his coat and produced a jagged shell fragment copper jacket still warm when he'd pried it from the armor. AP M62, the same type tested at Kummersdorf. The room fell silent. At last, Albrecht sighed. "Our engineers warned this might happen. The Americans value firing tempo, but we can't design new loaders in a week." Volk's jaw tightened. "Then we adapt." Over the next days, the Panther crews learned quickly. They reorganized ammunition racks to keep shells closer to the breech. Loaders drilled until their arms ached, timing themselves to beat 7 seconds per reload. Commanders pre-ranged likely target areas, so the gunner could fire faster once contact began. Still, it wasn't enough. For every Panther that scored a perfect ambush, 2 others were hit before firing twice. The Shermans came in platoons, coordinating by radio, overlapping their fire arcs. Their stabilizers allowed them to shoot while rolling at 10 kilometers per hour, not accurately, but fast enough to suppress. One German lieutenant called it a storm of steel, not from one gun but from many, like a single heartbeat shared among machines. Volk understood now what that meant. December 23rd. The snow had stopped, but the cold was worse, the kind that bit through gloves and froze sweat to skin. Volk's Panther platoon had been ordered to counterattack near Foy, a small Belgian village held by elements of the US 10th Armoured Division. They moved at dawn, the sun a pale smear behind low clouds. At the village outskirts, smoke rose from burning trucks. The Americans had dug in, Shermans positioned between stone farmhouses for cover. Volk could see 3 barrels pointing out from the fog. He turned to his gunner, We'll take the left one. Wait for my mark. The panther crawled forward, crunching frozen mud beneath its treads. Range, 700 meters. Target left Sherman, identified. Fire. The shell flew straight and true, piercing through the enemy turret. Flames erupted instantly. One down, Engel said. Reload. The loader shoved another round in, breath steaming. Up! But before Engel could fire, 2 muzzle flashes answered from the village, the remaining Shermans firing almost simultaneously. 2 impacts slammed into their armour, one on the mantlet, another glancing the driver's plate. Gunner return fire! Trying. They're fast. The panther fired again. The round missed, detonating against a barn wall. Seconds later, another American shell smashed into the turret ring. The entire interior filled with the smell of burnt paint and metal. Sparks rained, down. Volk slammed his fist against the periscope. Back! Reverse! The driver threw the tank into reverse, treads grinding, snow exploding behind them. A final 76mm round struck their left side armour, denting but not penetrating. The crew barely escaped destruction. When they reached cover behind a ruined farmhouse, Engel turned, shaking his head. They fired 3 times before our second. Volk looked through the hatch at the smoking village. They don't hesitate, that's the difference. That afternoon, Luftwaffe reconnaissance reported something remarkable. Aerial photographs showed dozens of Sherman 76 seconds spread across the Ardennes like an advancing tide. Their formations disciplined, their logistics uninterrupted despite German counterattacks. The enemy didn't win by single kills, they won by momentum. Each tank, firing fast and coordinated, acted as part of a machine larger than itself. The Germans, with superior optics and armour, still fought like duelists. The Americans fought like engineers, each tank a cog in an industrial rhythm. Major Albrecht sent a telegram back to headquarters, summarizing what the frontline crews had discovered. Enemy 76mm Sherman exhibits exceptional reload and response time, capable of sustained engagement at intervals under 6 seconds. Recommend tactical adjustment, simultaneous volley fire from multiple Panthers to break tempo. Volk read the report over Albrecht's shoulder and murmured, "They're not faster because they're stronger. They're faster because they practiced." That night, Volk's platoon received orders to intercept an American armoured column retreating west along a forest road. They set up ambush positions, engines off, silhouettes masked by branches. At 2200 hours, the faint rumble of Sherman engines filled the night. The column passed within 400 meters. Volk whispered through the intercom, "Fire on my mark. All guns, same target." 3 Panthers fired at once. The first 2 shells struck, the third overpenetrated. 2 Shermans burned immediately. "Reload quickly," Volk urged, but before his loader could seat the next round, tracers streaked toward them not from rifles, but tank guns. The Shermans had already reacted, their turrets traversing even before the explosions faded. Boom, boom, boom. 3 shots in 15 seconds, perfectly timed. 1 Panther took a round through the lower hull, another's turret jammed. Volk's own tank rocked violently as a shell shattered the mantlet shield, filling the turret with smoke. He tasted iron, blood. The periscope was cracked, but he could still see 1 Sherman advancing, its gun barrel glowing red from heat. "Fire! Now!" Their shot left the barrel, striking the Sherman square in the glacis. The tank stopped moving a kill, but the last American fired, even as it burned. Its 76mm round smashed into the Panther's flank, penetrating. The interior erupted in flame. Screamed as shrapnel tore through his arm. "Out! Out now!" Volk shouted, yanking the hatch open. The freezing air hit like a hammer. They jumped into the snow, rolling as the tank behind them exploded. From the tree line, Volk looked back and saw the silhouette of his Panther, burning against the night sky. Next to it, the wreck of a Sherman, equally aflame. 2 machines, 2 philosophies, dying in the same frozen forest. Dawn broke over a landscape of blackened husks, the smell of oil, rubber, and pine mixed into a single bitter scent. German recovery teams combed the field for salvageable parts. Volk, bandaged and shivering, stood beside what remained of his tank. The war had turned. He could feel it not just in losses, but in tempo. The Americans moved faster, repaired faster, fired faster. Their war was not about perfection. It was about persistence. Major Albrecht approached quietly. "You did well, Heinrich. 2 confirmed kills." "At the cost of 3 Panthers," Volk replied. Albrecht nodded grimly. "The Reich can't afford this trade anymore." Volk looked east, toward the sound of distant guns. "They win because they don't hesitate. Every second we think, they act." Days later, fragments from the Bastogne sector were delivered back to the Kummersdorf testing ground. Among them burned shell casings from Sherman 76 seconds, recovered from German tank wrecks. Major Hartmann examined them under lamplight. Even scorched, the casings gleamed like gold. He ran a finger along one edge, whispering, 5 seconds between life and death. He placed the casing beside his report from Chapter 1, the firing trials that few had believed. Now, no one could deny them. Germany had designed the finest tanks in the world, but the Americans had designed the fastest. And in the dying winter of 1944, speed had become the deadliest weapon of all. Early February 1945. Snow drifted across the proving grounds at Kummersdorf, the once bustling heart of the Wehrmacht's weapons research network. What had been a complex of noise and confidence testing the newest Panther turrets and gas turbines was now a graveyard of half-assembled prototypes and silent range towers. The war had turned decisively against Germany, and even the engineers knew it. Major Karl Hartmann, technical evaluator for armoured vehicle gunnery, rubbed his gloved hands together as he stepped into the cold concrete bunker marked Versuchsstand C4. Inside, Lieutenant Helmut Brenner was already waiting beside the familiar American machine, the M4A176W Sherman. Serial number hastily stenciled in chalk on its glacis. The same tank they had received from the Aachen front 3 months before, now streaked with soot and mud frozen solid. The workshop smelled of cold oil and acetylene. A captured Maybach HL 230 engine sat nearby, stripped for bearings that would never be replaced. Hartmann's breath fogged as he read the day's order. Continue timed fire. Evaluation of US 76 mm. Gun M1A1. Focus on sustained firing rate and loader fatigue after 60 seconds of continuous operation. He glanced at Brenner. "Another exercise in futility," he muttered. "Berlin wants reports to show our superiority. We both know the truth." Brenner offered a tired smile. "Truth seems in short supply lately, Herr Major." They began again at 0830. The test crew, 4 conscripts from a disbanded training battalion, took positions inside the captured Sherman. The gun breech was polished clean. The turret traverse motor hummed faintly under generator power. A wooden crate of American M62 AP shells waited beside the loader's station. Hartmann checked his stopwatch. "On my signal, fire as trained. Record every 10 seconds. Jawohl." The loader slammed the first round home. The gun barked crisp, fast recoil. 10 seconds. Another shell. 20. A third. By 40 seconds, the breech was cycling rhythmically 6 aimed shots in the time it clies. Took a Panther crew to complete 3. Hartmann noted everything. Barrel temperature. Loader's breathing. Turret traverse between simulated targets. Each number reinforced the same conclusion he'd reached since December. The American gun might not be more powerful, but its crew could sustain a higher rate of accurate fire than any German design in service. When the final round ejected, Brenner stopped the stopwatch. 1 minute, 8 rounds fired. The loader says he could manage 10 with practice. Hartmann looked up from his clipboard. 10 aimed shots per minute, he whispered. Our Panther averages 4 before fatigue sets in. Even with the 75 litres, 70, the first accurate follow-up takes 8 seconds. He stared at the compact breech, the logical layout of stowed ammunition, the generous turret ring that let a man move freely. It wasn't elegant like German engineering, it was efficient. Not artistry, Brenner said, as if reading his thoughts. Just ergonomics. Hartmann's pencil hovered above the report form. Ergonomics, he wrote anyway, a word almost never used in Wehrmacht documents. By mid-February, Kummersdorf had compiled 60 pages of notes, comparing the Sherman 76mm M1A1 with Germany's K42 and K40 guns. The results were quietly damning. Parameter, Sherman 76mm, Panther 75 litres, 70 Panzer IV 75 litres, 48, average reload time 6.5 sec, 9.2, sec 8.1, sec, average traverse to target 3 sec electric, 8 sec manual, assist 7, SEC crew fatigue after 60 SEC coup, minimal high moderate, mean first shot accuracy, at 1,000 metres, 78%, 82%, 70%. Sustained hit rate 1 minute 6. 0 hits, 3.5 hits, 3.8 hits. The Panther still had superior penetration and optics, but in a dynamic fight where seconds meant survival, the Sherman could simply shoot more often. Hartmann drafted his analysis for the Heereswaffenamt. American design philosophy emphasizes ease of crew action and simplicity of loading mechanism. The result is faster engagement cycles and higher sustained fire. Our current turret designs prioritize armor slope and optics at the expense of crew efficiency. He paused before sending it. By now, technical reports that hinted at inferiority vanished into bureaucratic silence or worse, summoned questions from political officers. He signed it anyway. Someone, somewhere, should know. 2 weeks later, the report returned stamped Zurückgestellt. No further action. Deferred. Ignored. Filed away in a system already collapsing under air raids and shortages. Late February. Allied bombers had flattened most of Berlin's outskirts. Kummersdorf itself shuddered nightly from distant impacts. Inside the mess hall, Hartmann and Brenner shared thin soup and the last of the bread ration. "Do you ever think," Brenner asked quietly, "that all our brilliance, our armour thickness, our optics amounted to nothing?" Hartmann stirred his bowl. "Not nothing, but incomplete. We built masterpieces for the factory floor, not for the field. The Americans built tools." He pulled from his pocket a small notebook filled with observations. U.S. Loaders trained to reload at any gun angle. Electric traverse stable even on engine idle. Hydraulic recoil buffer easy to service. "We design the machine and expect the man to adapt," Brenner laughed bitterly. "And now we pay the price in burned Panthers." Outside, the wind carried the rumble of another distant column retreating east. The war was moving away from them, toward its inevitable end. On March 15, orders arrived to evacuate key prototypes to Haustenbeck in Westphalia. Fuel was scarce. Most heavy transports were immobilized. Hartmann decided to run one last comparative test before they left for history, he said. They rolled out the Sherman beside a surviving Panzer IV Ausf. The American gun would fire first, then the German, alternating at 800 meters targets of armored plate. The Sherman's loader Unteroffizier Reiss loaded smoothly, almost gracefully. 6 rounds fired in 60 seconds. The German loader, working around the cramped breech shield, managed 3. When the stopwatch clicked, the difference echoed louder than any explosion. Brenner leaned against the range wall. "If we had this rhythm 2 years ago," he said, "perhaps Kursk would have ended differently." Hartmann didn't answer. He was watching the American breech still smoking lightly, the empty shell casings neatly ejected onto the turret floor. The simplicity was maddening. He wrote his final note. "In the end, mechanical perfection without human efficiency is self-defeating. The enemy's advantage is not in metallurgy or chemistry, but in design philosophy aligned with soldier capability. The 76mm gun embodies this principle. He closed the logbook. "Seal it with the rest," he told Brenner. "If anyone ever studies this place, let them see we understood eventually." April 1945. Allied columns crossed the Elbe. Kummersdorf staff burned papers in metal drums. Prototypes were scuttled in nearby pits. The captured Sherman still sat in the hangar, one track broken, a relic among ruins. Hartmann stayed until the last truck left. As he watched flames consume his reports, he hesitated and kept one folder, the timed fire results of the 76mm gun. He slipped it inside his coat before walking toward the forest. He reached Haustenbeck 2 weeks later, half-starved. The Americans arrived 3 days after that. When they demanded identification, Hartmann handed over his pistol and the folder. "This," he said in English learned from manuals, "you will want." The American ordnance captain opened the folder, brow rising at the tables and neat German script. "What is this?" "Your tank," Hartmann replied. "We tested it." They exchanged a long look, the defeated engineer and the curious Victor. Then the captain nodded. "We'll take care of it." Hartmann never saw the folder again. In 1946, at the U.S. Army Ordnance School in Aberdeen, Maryland, analysts examining captured German documents found Hartmann's data tucked among other Kummersdorf files. The translated title read, "Evaluation of U.S. 76mm gun M1A1 rate of fire and combat efficiency." The report impressed them. American officers preparing new armor doctrine quoted it directly. The enemy recognized that superior crew efficiency and rapid reload are decisive in tank combat. Instructors used it to teach that a tank's effectiveness is measured not by the power of one round, but by the number of accurate rounds delivered in time. Meanwhile, in occupied Germany, Hartmann worked quietly for the Allies under the Operation Paperclip equivalent for ordnance engineers. He never built tanks again. When interviewed years later, he recalled the tests without bitterness. "We thought victory came from complexity," he said. "Then we tested a simple gun that just worked faster. That day, I realized war is won by seconds, not millimeters." By the 1,950 seconds, armored design around the world shifted toward crew efficiency and reload optimization, power-assisted rammers, hydraulic turrets, simplified ammunition stowage. Even the new German Leopard 1 would embrace mobility and ergonomics over sheer armor. Few remembered where that realization began. A snow-covered range in February 1945, a captured Sherman firing rhythmically against steel plates while 2 weary German engineers timed the shots. At Fort Moore, Georgia, decades later, a weathered file in the U.S. armor collection still bears a faded stamp. Kummersdorf 76mm, M1A1 tests. Inside are Hartmann's tables, the neat blue-penciled annotations, and a final handwritten line in German, "Schnelligkeit schlägt Stärke," speed defeats strength. The Sherman gun that once astonished its captors had become a lesson carved into the doctrine of every modern army, that efficiency, coordination, and sustained firepower matter more than the raw size of a shell. And somewhere in those numbers, amid the ruins of a lost war, Major Karl Hartmann's quiet truth endured the understanding that the ultimate measure of engineering is not brilliance on paper, but performance in the hands of the men who must fight with it.